member for Morani.
Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak on the Strengthening Community Safety Bill 2023. The bill seeks to target the small cohort of serious repeat young offenders who engage in persistent and serious offending with the amendments to the Bail Act 1980, the Youth Justice Act 1992 and the Police Powers and Responsibility Act 2000. The bill also amends the code to increase maximum penalties for certain offences related to the unlawful use or possession of a motor vehicle, aircraft or vessels. As a representative of a regional electorate here in Queensland, the issue of youth crime has long been a major focus of mine, and every day it seems I hear stories that would raise the hairs on anyone's head. Children of 12 being burnt alive in stolen cars driven by another 12-year-old, and old ladies viciously bashed in their own homes. According to the latest Productivity Commission figures, Queensland spends more on youth justice than any other state or territory in Australia. And since 2017, the government has invested more than $550 million in new youth detention centres, staffing, beds and early intervention programs. For the 2021 year alone, the state allocated $296 million to this issue. A great deal of this multi-million-dollar splurge on tackling youth crime, however, is being spent on services that are neither well-targeted or community-driven. Local community leaders are simply not being given a voice when it comes to exactly what programs and services they most need to address their region-specific situation. This is also true of our Aboriginal communities. Many traditional owners I have spoken with say current child centre services models are failing their young people who need much more community-driven solutions with a focus on the empowerment of families. They don't want top-down, one-size-fits-all solutions, Mr Speaker. They want to be involved in a lot more closely designed, tailored solutions that match their specific problems and their needs. Deputy Speaker, a 21st February joint statement from the Queensland Premier, Police Minister and Youth Justice Minister, the government said it was making good on the 29 December promise to make tough laws even tougher. To that end, the bill before the House includes provisions extending the period of conditional release orders from 3 to 6 months, providing courts with the ability to label a child as a serious repeat offender and is subject to tougher sentences. Currently, Section 29 of the Bail Act provides that an adult defendant must not break any condition of the undertaking on which a defendant was granted bail. It is an offence punishable by a maximum of 2 years' imprisonment. Clause 5 of the bill removes the restrictions within this section which prevent it being applied to children. This will mean that the children can be charged with an offence and imprisoned for 2 years if they breach their bail conditions. These new provisions show that the government ongoing attachment to one-size-fits-all Band-Aid model when it comes to addressing the problems in the regions. Courts need to have the ability to tailor bail conditions to a child's particular circumstances, and these conditions can range from drug rehabilitation, work placements or participation in youth or country programs. Others include banning children from a particular location, taking part in drug rehabilitation program or even joining a local sporting group. Such programs introduce structure and self-discipline into a child's life, often for the first time. Sadly, Clause 8 of the bill will increase the maximum penalties for unlawful use or possession of a motor vehicle and other forms of transport, where the offence is committed at night or the offender is liable to imprisonment for 12 years. Offenders that use or threaten violence will be liable to imprisonment for 14 years. As victims of crime said in their submission on the bill, these sorts of tough-on-crime provisions amount to little more than smoke and mirrors on the part of the government. If the maximum penalty for murder is currently 10 years, there is no way a judge is giving a juvenile 14 years for unlawful use of a motor vehicle. What point is there in raising a maximum penalty when the judges are not even prepared to enforce the existing ones? Unless you're prepared to legislate for minimum sentences, the whole thing is a waste of time. Clause 8 also creates new circumstances of aggravation for cases where an offender publishes material relating to their crime on social media. Under provisions in this bill, such an offender will now be liable to imprisonment for 12 years, and that seems extremely excessive to me. What is the true intent of such a provision? Because if it's simply about stopping people from advertising their crimes on social media, wouldn't it make more sense to ask social media platforms simply to not post the items in the first place? And as the Queensland Law Society, QLS, points out in their submission, These sorts of social media posts are actually extremely useful as an evidentiary tool for the police. Another concern relates to clause 14.
Could I interrupt you for a moment, please, Member for Moroney? Member for Pine Rivers, that sound you just made was quite unparliamentary, and I've heard you make it a number of times before. I warn you, understand. It was actually. You are currently on a warning. Member for Pine Rivers, would you please leave the chamber for 1 hour under 253A? Please continue, Member for Moroney.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Another concern relates to clause 14 of the bill, which extends the use of electronic monitoring devices to children as young as 15. As QLS pointed out, at 15, children are still subject to mandatory school attendance, and therefore applying such a measure to a school-going child is inappropriate and unjustifiable. I'm also not happy with the bill's provision extending the program another 2 years. By all accounts, only 8% of offenders were fitted with the devices during the last trial, rendering it impossible to determine what benefits, if there was any, were derived from the initial program. Surely the money spent on the program would be better spent on other measures that might actually help deter crime and enhance community safety. According to the Productivity Commission's recent report, Queensland has by far the worst recidivism rate in the nation, and this has now become a systemic problem for which there will be no easy fix. Unfortunately, once incarceration rates reach a certain level in a community, there is a tipping point where imprisonment fails to reduce the offending and starts actually contributing to it. When every family and individual within a certain area knows someone in prison, offending and imprisonment just becomes a part of the socialisation process. As imprisonment becomes normalised in this way, the prospect of prison loses much of its deterrent effect, becoming instead a fact of life, or even in some communities, a rite of passage. When detention no longer deters increasing maximum sentences by a year or two, it's just pointless. Don't get me wrong, youth crime is without doubt a massive problem in regional Queensland, and something needs to be done. But without meaningful interventions and targeted programs, bills like this one just speak to the growing apathy on the part of the government, an apathy that is starting to border on negligence. To reduce juvenile crime, programs need to address the underlying reasons why young people are offending in the first place, such as boredom and lack of appropriate role models as the victims for crime's sake. The absence of programs to address the aimlessness and boredom of young people in the regions has played a big part in the high rates of juvenile offending. This is a huge problem in the regions, with many people stealing cars because they have nothing better to do. Such kids attend school infrequently and can be found roaming on the streets at all hours in gangs looking for something to alleviate their boredom. The vast majority of them, I have to say, come from broken family units, mostly ones with no male presence. That's just not me saying so, but the overwhelming conclusion of some 40 years of research on youth crime, drugs another huge factor, that is not being properly discussed or addressed. Many young people in regions are on drugs, some even using their lunch money to buy ice. Violent video games and exposure to online pornography are two more concerns that many people in the regions have spoken to me about. All these issues are having a hugely detrimental impact on young people's behaviour, something that can't be separated from the high rate of crime and imprisonment in Queensland. Deputy Speaker, bills such as this one simply show the government's complete lack of engagement with regional communities on this issue, and I'm sure of it. Programs and strategies need to be properly targeted. The problems facing rural and regional towns when it comes to youth crime are multifaceted and entrenched, and there is no one-size-fits-all solution here. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Moroney. Could I ask you, please, to move that the debate be adjourned?